The subject of the lecture is the subject of this book, which in English is called Three Theories of Everything. It's a very modest title. It's connected with Stephen Hawking's, of course, the theory of everything, or GUTS, the Grand Unified Theory Systems. But he only has one, and I have three. It's also in German, and as you see, of course, the German book is larger than the English book. So you're welcome to have a look at those. The lecture material normally takes about 6 hours to deliver. But because you're university people, very bright, very academic, I can compress it, and it should work. A theory of everything is a worldview, a Weltanschauung. It is a way of looking, or a kind of glasses that we wear. And the glasses can be called presuppositions, those things that we suppose before we suppose anything else. The preconditions of understanding, or the preconditions, the paradigms of epistemology. Can I talk like that to you? Is it okay? You understand my English? English is my second language. My mother language is American. But I learned English as a second language, and I find it works better for teaching situations to work in English. When I thought about absolute worldviews, it seemed to me that there weren't very many, because an absolute is a category that is so big that it contains all of the particulars. When I did a series of lectures in Aarhus in Denmark last October, and to advertise the lecture series, some students, about 50 of them, wore black t-shirts with white letters, and the letters said, "Are all absolutes absurd?" Question mark. Which is a very neat question, you see, because it eats itself by the tail. If all absolutes are absolutely absurd, then that one is too, which means that most likely all absolutes are not absurd. There are some absolutes that are not absurd, which is politically incorrect in a postmodern culture, as most of you know, especially if you study literature or sociology or something like that. You know that absolutes are dirty words. They're things that we should not hold because they tend toward manipulation and hegemony and hierarchy and those sorts of nasty things. But even though absolutes are problematic, I'm not sure that the wisest thing is to throw them all out. It might be like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You clean the baby, and then you throw the baby out with the bathwater, and then you have a clean situation, but you don't have any baby. So, I don't know, we have to find the right way forward. All human beings are human beings. And each of us have some things in common. Human beings tend to prefer to breathe air than to breathe water. This is a common thing. We also prefer to breathe than to not breathe. You can test this with each other, and you can prove my point. Life is good. We breathe, we eat, we touch, we enjoy, we are stimulated, we have an effect, we fulfill, we satisfy. There are very good things about life, but life is full of suffering. We are alienated, we are lonely, we suffer, we have toothaches, people don't like us, we are frustrated, our projects fail, our agendas are not agreed upon by our neighbors. We have all kinds of ways that we suffer. So if life is good, why are things so wrong? Human beings complain. That's something we all have in common. In every culture, every race, every language group, every period of history, human beings complain. And it seems to me that that is as it should be, because something is wrong. There are people who don't complain. They think everything is fine. There's absolutely, mostly you find them in mental hospitals. Because reality is not actually like that. Reality has things that we should legitimately complain about. And a basic question of human life is, why do I suffer? And can anything be done about it? What is the cause of suffering? And is there a solution? Can something be done so that I suffer less? So that is a fundamental human question. And people explore that question in a variety of ways. It is more fundamental to suffer than to think. So you know about René Descartes, French guy, 18th century, father of modern philosophy. He said famously, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. I would rather say, I hurt, therefore I am. Because more people can relate to that. Not everybody thinks, but everybody hurts. I tell you quickly an account about René Descartes. René Descartes walked into a bar and he ordered a beer. And the bartender put the beer on the counter, and he drank the beer, and he put the empty glass on the counter. And the bartender said, would you like to have another one? And René Descartes said, oh, I think not. And he disappeared. Okay. When we think about answers to this basic question, and absolute answers that will contextualize all the variables, that will be theory of everything, it boils down to 3 or 2.5. But we'll start with 3. And so I'm going to make some marks on this board. And please pretend with me that these marks are circles. And then we're going to give them names. We're going to call this one 1, and this one 2, and this one 3. Now, each of these worldviews have some important things in common. And one of the most important things they have in common is a similar understanding of the history of reality. Most worldviews believe that there was a perfect beginning. Certainly all religious worldviews believe in a perfect beginning. But atheism, which I regard as very religious, also has an understanding of a perfect beginning. For instance, an atheistic astrophysicist, a cosmologist, will tend to believe in a singularity. No? Yes. A singularity in which there are no anomalies. It is a perfect beginning. And then there was a big bang, and anomalies occurred. Friction, entropy, various nasty things like that came into reality, and then we suffer. But it has a perfect beginning, and then an imperfection occurs in the history of reality. Now, in cosmological, atheistic, astrophysical worldview, you probably will posit a yo-yo universe in which it expands and then it contracts again and it returns to the perfection of the singularity, which in astrophysical terms is hopeful. But in terms of my retirement plan, it's not, it doesn't actually apply so well. So I'm not only looking for the big ideas, which are important, I'm looking for applying the big ideas in our individual lives and situations. So if reality has a perfect beginning, and then something went wrong, and because something went wrong, I suffer, and I should complain, and then I look for it to be made right again. And some of you will immediately recognize that that is the biblical worldview, but it isn't only the biblical worldview. It's true of other worldviews that are very different from the biblical worldview. But in the biblical worldview, there is a perfect God, the beginning, who made a perfect world and perfect people. Fine. And then something went wrong. Sin, rebellion, alienation, self-centeredness, death. And we suffer. And we look for it to be made right in Jesus Christ. Okay, that is the basic outline of the biblical worldview. Perfect, imperfect, perfect. A, B, A, which is the basic structure of almost all music. A, B, A. We begin at home, we go away into development and recapitulation and dissonances, and then we come home again. That's why music is such a powerful art form, because it is in microcosm the history of the universe in a little piece of Mozart. So that's why we feel the music so viscerally. It's so powerful, because it really is an echo, an example of the whole picture of reality, which other art forms may be. But music, you can tell I studied ethnomusicology. I did not study graphic arts, although I have close friends who are graphic artists. If the original perfection is good and then things go wrong and then they're made right again, it's essential to know what was reality like when it was perfect. Because if we know that, we will know what is wrong. And we can intelligently, truly complain. And we can intelligently look for a solution. If I don't know what is right or what is perfect, all I can say is, ugh. I can't say anything articulate. I can't say anything intelligent, because I don't know what I'm complaining about. I only know that I am uncomfortable. I am uncomfortable. Why? The answer to the question why is because your situation is different from the original perfection. But in order to understand the meaning of your suffering, you have to know what is the perfect situation in which there is no suffering. There are a few different understandings of what the original perfection is like, and that is these three: 1, 2, and 3. So I'll give them subtitles. We'll call this one Monism, and this one Dualism, and this one Trinitarianism. You don't find Trinitarianism in the dictionary. It's a very good word. I made it up. And after I die, it will come into the dictionary and into common use. So this is one of my hopes. Okay, ism means that whatever comes before the ism is the central way of understanding and evaluating reality. So if the central way of understanding and evaluating the reality is the human being, what do you have? Humanism. If the central way of understanding and evaluating reality is the rationality, what do you have? Rationalism. If the central way of observing and evaluating reality is the community, what do you have? Ha! You see how this works. So mono means, of course, one. So this is one-ism. And this is two-ism. And this is three-ism. Now, there may be other basic isms. There are certainly other minor isms that are subsets of these, but I haven't found them. So if any of you know what they are, tell me, and I will rewrite the book. So we'll have 4 theories of everything, or 5 theories of everything. That appeals to me as an American because more is better. Bigger is better. This idea is very powerful and very inviting, very attractive, and very ancient. It began probably in southern Asia, possibly in India, when people thousands of years ago looked around themselves and observed and experienced reality. And they observed and experienced that there is a very powerful unity in reality. There's one earth, one sky, one human race, one cycle of day and night, one cycle of 4 seasons, one water cycle. There's a very powerful unity. And there is also diversity. There are different kinds of weather, different kinds of people and circumstances. The unities are stable and faithful. You can depend on them. You don't have to stay awake at night wondering if the sun will rise or if it will rise in the west instead of the east. You can be perfectly at peace about that. It is a unity, and there is no suffering connected with that unity. It's solid, it's stable. We can be glad about it without exception. It's a permanent goodness and stability in our life. And there are other basic things. Now, these people observed and experienced these things not because they were eating funny mushrooms. We all experience and observe the same thing. It is the way human beings on planet Earth experience reality. There's nothing religious about it. It's just the way it happens. Then, beginning with this experience, they reasoned. See, it was a rational process that the original perfection must be a perfect unity, because they experienced less suffering in the unities than in the diversities. Do you see the logic of it? It's not irrational, it's not crazy, it's not disconnected, it's not fantastic or visionary, it's rational to come to that conclusion. Just because it's rational doesn't mean it has to be true. See, now that will be hard on you Cartesians and Aristotelians in the room. But just because it's logical doesn't mean it's true, because truth does not equal fact or logic. Truth equals fact plus meaning. And what does meaning mean? That's the big headache question, isn't it? Meaning means relationships, which means that nothing has meaning in itself. Political incorrectness, once again. Nothing and no one has meaning in themselves. Meaning is only beyond identity. In fact, identity is beyond identity in relationships. Okay, so the bumper sticker slogan during the hippie New Age movement era, I was a hippie. You may have heard about them. An ancient race of people lived on the west coast of North America. Mostly have died out. A few of us, fossilized remains, are still with us. During that time, there was a great slogan that said, "All is one." All is one. That's a very neat bumper sticker, soundbite kind of slogan, and it's very powerful and very inviting, because if all is one, you are God. How can it be otherwise? That's easy to accept. It's harder to accept that I am also God, but you have to take the bitter with the better. If all is one, then everything is God. So if all is one, there is not God and not God. There is only God. And so it is incorrect to say God. The idea of pantheism has the wrong name. It should be called pan-everythingism. Because pantheism implies there is the theos and the not theos. but that isn't what the word means. It means everything is everything. If you say everything is everything, you have to give up the idea of there being a God that is its own entity and has some sort of relationship or influence on other parts of reality, because there are no other parts of reality. All is one. It's not a joke, it's not a plaything, it's not a computer game. It's a real theory of everything. It's a real Weltanschauung. To see things as unity. And one advantage is you are God. Another advantage is there cannot be any alienation. And this concept is taught to children in various ways, and one of the ways is a drop of water. A drop of water suffers because he worries about evaporation. He's lonely and alienated from his brother and sister drops. And he's frustrated because the purpose of water is for fish to swim in it, and he's too small. So he suffers a lot. What is the solution? The solution is he will go back into the ocean, dissolve, and become one with the all. And then he laughs at evaporation. And then he's united with his brother and sister drops, and fish swim in him, and he is fulfilled, you see. But he cannot be fulfilled when he has individual ego-conscious identity. He only can be fulfilled when he dissolves and becomes the all. It doesn't mean he becomes part of the all. He becomes all of the all. He is truly dissolved. And then his suffering is finished. Be sure not to confuse monism with monotheism. Monotheism is the belief in one God. Monism is the belief in one. Probably more human beings have been monists than any of the other worldviews. It's extremely popular and attractive and powerful. Monism is the basis of Buddhism and Hinduism, the great monistic religions, and some others, perhaps Jainism or some other less known religions. In Buddhism, there are 4 spiritual laws, which are not the same as the spiritual laws of Campus Crusade, but it's interesting, there are 4. And the first one is the noble truth of suffering. Everything, everybody suffers. This is obviously true and accurate, and the Bible would not disagree with it. Everything, everybody suffers. Then the second noble truth is the law of the cause of suffering. And the cause of suffering is desire. If we desire, we suffer. If we don't desire, we don't suffer. So if I have a toothache and I desire that the pain will stop and the pain does not stop, I suffer. If I have a toothache and I do not desire that the pain will stop and the pain does not stop, I am free. There is pain, but no suffering, because I identify with the pain. I am I. Pain is I am. No suffering. You see how that works? I mean, you see from a distance how that works. You have to do quite a bit of meditating before you see up close how that works. But it actually does work, and people who meditate a lot, meditation becomes a therapeutic methodology for them, and it is, in fact, therapeutic. So if everything is originally one, and that is perfection, and we experience imperfection, the imperfection is diversity. The perfection is unity, and then evil is diversity. Because in diversity there is desire, and desire causes suffering. So it's like a nightmare. I have a nightmare of diversity, of samsara, of maya. What is the solution to a nightmare? You wake up. And that's exactly the solution in monism, awakening or enlightenment. You're caught in the nightmare of diversity and suffering and ego consciousness. And the solution is to wake up out of that nightmare into the original perfect reality of unity. You see, it's not rocket science. It is available to all human beings at any level of intelligence or education. It's universally accessible to human beings. Young children, senile people, everyone can get this, which is the power of it. It's not just a specialized kind of thing. It's a universal kind of thing. The monist, realizing that everyone is living in the nightmare, developed a group of therapeutic methodologies in order to help people wake up. And one of them is meditation, that you probably know something about meditation. And maybe you know that in order to meditate, you have to stop thinking. Because thinking is relational and relationships are evil. Thinking is linear and relational and rational. Rational means seeing and experiencing reality in ratios or relationships, rationality. And that is evil because it's involving relationships. You see, we're talking about an absolute. If unity is perfect and diversity is not, then hatred is evil because it is a relationship. And love is evil because it is a relationship. It's not a game. It's not how you feel about it. It's not, well, I like love, so I'm going to say love is okay because, you know, we say love and everyone goes bzzz, and we have this happy buzz. And so I want to hang on to love, or at least the word, but hate, oh no, hate has very bad press. I'm happy to get rid of hate, but you see, that's totally dishonest. That's totally inconsequential. That's totally unreal and irrational. If you're going to be honest and rational, you have to deal with the categories that obtain. And if all is one, then love is evil. Get over it. Grow up. Wake up. Smell the coffee. No, don't smell the coffee. Just wake up. Because you see, if you smell the coffee, that's evil because it's a relationship. You mustn't smell the coffee. You must be the coffee. And see, that sounds funny. It is funny because you have Western Cartesian Aristotelian minds. But if you were good Japanese or Indian people, that wouldn't be funny at all. That would just ring true. Oh yeah, you don't smell the coffee, you are the coffee. I've asked Indian people at receptions, you meet them and say, oh, hello, what is your name and what do you do? And they say, do? I am. And it was rude, you know, because they don't think in terms of my identity as what I do. My identity is being, and I share it with you, brother. What do you mean, what do I do? What a stupid, rude question. What do I do? The very idea, I am, which is what God said to Moses, so it's a pretty high category. Anyway, I am that I am, sum ut sum. I exist for the purpose of my existence. That's a heavy thing to say. So it's pretty powerful. So meditation, also mandala. You know mandala, the square or the round geometric design that can be very ornate, that has a center. And the point is, it has a center. Our situation is compared to a wheel. And the wheel turns, and it is the wheel of birth and death. The wheel of the transmigration of the soul. And we're born into suffering, and then we die. And then we're born into suffering, and then we die. And this is reincarnation. It was realized early on that the average person does not fully awaken during their lifetime, so the doctrine of reincarnation became obviously necessary. It takes more time than one lifetime in order to wake up, so it's obviously There has to be reincarnation. Now in the West, reincarnation has a very good press. We have very happy, positive ideas about it. It's, I get another chance. It's a form of eternal life. Maybe next time I'll have straight teeth. There are just all sorts of optimistic attitudes toward reincarnation. But where reincarnation originated, it is regarded as the worst curse. Because the wheel turns and you're born into suffering and then you die. And you're born into suffering and then you die. And so the goal is to stop being reincarnated. You're forced to be reincarnated by the nightmare, by the illusion. Freedom is to stop being reincarnated because you have awakened and realized your oneness with the all. Okay? So you have reincarnation, mandala, which is this point. The wheel turns and we want to get off the wheel. Stop the world, I want to get off. How do we get off? We can't get off by flying off into outer space. We can get off by coming into the center. What is at the center of a turning wheel? A point, and what is in the point? It doesn't move. Why? It's the center, and what is in the center? Nothing. That's the magic word. Nothing, with a capital N. Nothing. And you see, the nothing does not turn. In nothing, there is freedom. In something, there is tyranny, slavery. In nothing, there is freedom, because the nothing does not turn. When you realize nothing, you realize everything. So the Zen equation would be 0 equals infinity. And in that there is freedom. Zen Buddhists aren't given to mathematical equations, but if they were, they would love this one. So there is the mandala, and the meditation, and the reincarnation, and yoga, which means union. So that's obvious that the purpose of yoga is to unite all of reality. Now in the West, we think of one of 5 kinds of yoga. We think of hatha yoga, which is standing on your head in a pretzel. Okay, that is a valid part of yoga, but it's just one of 5 parts. There's hatha yoga, jnana yoga, which is the yoga of the intellect, bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion, karma yoga, the yoga of work, and raja yoga, the yoga of meditation and transcendence. The system is comprehensive. You all practice yoga. If you read a book, you do jnana yoga. If you work, you do karma yoga. You cannot escape the yogic system. It is comprehensive. So the question is the yogic system the answer? Does it make us return to the original perfection of reality or not? And of course, a lot of people believe that it does, because it's so big and it's so comprehensive, and it fits in with this basic philosophical idea, this paradigm, this presupposition, that the original perfection is perfect unity. And then there is mantra. Do you know mantra? The mantra is words that are spoken aloud and then internally until they become a vibration. And the vibration gets finer and finer and finer until it becomes the vibration of the quanta. It becomes the vibration of the electrons changing orbit in the atoms. And when you vibrate in that way, you vibrate in the same way that all physical matter in the cosmos vibrates. And this moves you toward awakening, toward awareness of oneness with the all, if you vibrate in that way. So there are these various therapeutic methodologies. Now, as I said, this is the basis of Buddhism. I used to be a Zen Buddhist monk, and in Buddhism there are a great variety of Buddhisms. You might call them denominations. There's Mahayana, Theravada, Hinayana, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nichiren Soshu, Pure Land School, Law Mystic, Tantric, all kinds of Buddhisms. And people from each group will tell you our Buddhism is the original true Buddhism. Now, those of you who are Christians, you cannot be patronizing, because I know people who think God is Lutheran. Okay? And we know he's Reformed. So we have a very similar situation. Now, because I was a Zen Buddhist, I can tell you Zen Buddhism really is the original true. Zen Buddhism is special. It's not monism, it's nonism. There is salvation in nothing, like the point in the turning world. It's not a negative nothing. It's a positive nothing. It's a pregnant nothing. I will illustrate. We might say it is possible that it will rain tonight. That possibility is real, and it is nothing. It is real and it is nothing. Everything that is possible. Can you think of something that is not possible? Is God possible? Is the devil possible? Are you possible? I know your parents sometimes say you're impossible, but it's not true. You are possible. Everything that is possible. So possibility is the mother of everything. Possibility is the nothing that is pregnant with everything. The deepest truth of Buddhism is Buddha is possibility. Tathata, Tathagata. The incarnation of suchness, undifferentiated quality. This is Buddha. Buddha is not the fat laughing guy in the restaurant painted gold. You see, there are many different ways of expressing Buddha artistically. Standing, sitting, lying down, fat, skinny, old, young. And if you have a restaurant, what kind of Buddha do you want? You want the fat laughing guy, because he inspires your customers. But do not reduce Buddha to this cute statue. Buddha is not cute. Buddha is the pregnant nothing. Buddha is possibility. So when you realize Buddha nature, you realize possibility. Well, the possibility is the nothing that is pregnant with everything. And that is the original perfection. You see, it's a unity of nothing that is pregnant with everything. And in that, there is no suffering. So you awaken through enlightenment into that reality. We say in Zen, if you see the Buddha, kill him. That means if you have a concept that absolute reality is outside of yourself and you should relate to the Buddha, you need to get rid of that idea or you'll never be enlightened. You must not see Buddha. You must be Buddha. And you must not become Buddha, because you always are Buddha. You must only awaken and realize Buddha nature. Okay, now that was a short Buddhist sermon. And by the silence and stillness in the room, I realize you recognize some of the power and attractiveness of that little sermon. And some Buddhist sermons are quite long, and they really are engaging and get you going. But even that short Buddhist sermon impacted you. It's not just a silly thing, it's very powerful and very attractive. Okay, so that's circle number one. That's the first theory of everything. Now, the second circle I will decorate, and you will recognize that symbol as the yin and yang, yin and yang. Is anyone Korean? Umyang. No, Umyang. The Koreans have it right. You see, we say yin and yang, and it's two things, but the umyang is one thing, and it has two sides. The umyang is the coin that has two sides. Yin and yang, it's too different. Let's say it in Korean if you really want to be right. This is a very old idea, and it began in Northern Asia, Korea, Japan, China, where people experienced and observed reality, and they realized that in reality there are opposites. There is hot and cold and light and dark and sharp and dull and sweet and bitter and male and female and up and down and in and out. There's everywhere, big opposites, little opposites. There are always opposites. And when the opposites are in harmony or balance with each other, life is good. But if there's imbalance or disharmony, we suffer. So if the weather is too dry, we suffer. If the weather is too wet, we suffer. But if there is a balance or a harmony, we don't suffer. Now, these people were also not eating funny mushrooms. They were just like us, observing and experiencing reality as it actually is. They were not fantasizing. They were just living as we live in the reality that we experience. Then they reasoned. Because of these observations and experiences, it is logical to suppose that the original perfection is the perfect balance of equal opposites. And we suffer because imbalance and disharmony has come into reality. So salvation is to restore the balance. And there have been various therapeutic methodologies developed in order to restore the balance, like macrobiotic diet, or feng shui, or ancestor worship to bring the balance of present and past, to balance periods and directions of time. So there are big elements and small elements. You balance your diet, you balance your history, you balance your interior decorating, you balance your city planning, you balance your nation, you balance your societal relationships in terms of these principles of restoring the balance. Now, I'm going to spend the least amount of time on this because I know least about it, and I would like to move on to the third circle. But I have a couple of difficulties with this system. One is I'm not sure it's truly absolute. What is the opposite of a river? It's difficult. Or what is the opposite of time? And how do you bring time into harmony with its opposite? My mind just starts to fry and smoke when I start to come to that. It doesn't seem to work. Some elements don't seem to work. Also, if a dualism is absolute and perfect, it is necessarily static. If anything changes, the perfection of the balance is destroyed. So when it is static, the second circle becomes the first circle. That's why I said it might be 2.5 theories of everything. So you see 3, but 1 and 2 tend to combine into the strongest point is 1. The unity. That's really strong. Okay, moving then to this third circle. I'm sorry this goes so fast, but they told me I had to quit. So we'll decorate this circle as well into 3 parts because it's Trinitarianism, and we'll call it Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. 3 persons. Now we're going to approach this circle in 2 ways. The first way is the same as we approached these circles, we're going to observe and experience reality and ask, where did it come from? What might be an explanation for what we experience and observe? This is called natural theology. You observe the creation and you find out something about the creator. It's a valid process academically and religiously, natural theology. Then the other way we're going to look at it is beginning with the Bible, which is revelation. And the Bible tells us things that we would not be able to discover rationally and scientifically. That we would not be able, beginning with our own experience and observation, arrive at some of the information that the Bible gives us that is fundamental to reality. And we're going to see if the revealed theology and the natural theology belong together in one whole reality, or if they contradict each other. If they contradict each other, I would recommend become a Zen Buddhist. If they don't contradict each other, that's a very interesting starting point. Maybe we're on to something. Maybe we're coming to a system of understanding reality that might work for us. So I'd like to start with unity, where we started in the first circle, and diversity. Each of the worldviews experiences unity and diversity. In the first circle, the logical conclusion is unity is good, diversity is evil. And there's nothing irrational about that conclusion. There's a lot going for it. The revelation of the Bible tells us that the original perfection of reality is perfectly unified and perfectly diversified. It is one God and three persons. I made up a proverb about this. It's not in the Bible, but it's a very good proverb. It says, God alone is God, and God is not alone. Gott allein ist Gott und Gott ist nicht allein. Dio solo è Dio e Dio non son solo. Dieu seul est Dieu et Dieu n'est pas seul. It's a good proverb because you can translate it and it still has the same rhythm, the same swing for it. You notice that in the Psalms and the Proverbs in the Bible. They don't rhyme by sound, they rhyme by juxtaposition and rhythm, which means they're translatable into every language, which is a beauty. No? Yeah, that's why God gave it to us like that, so that it was for everybody and not only for people who spoke Hebrew. Bless their hearts. I mean, I'm glad for people who spoke Hebrew, but the translations are equally valid artistically. I love that. Some of you must be artists. Just rejoice. Rejoice. It's in the artistic validity of the Bible. Okay, so, parentheses, close parentheses. Unity and diversity. If the original perfection is perfectly unified and perfectly diversified, then neither unity nor diversity are the cause of suffering. Because they're in the perfection and they're in the actuality. They're not an anomaly, they're not a distortion, they're only an extension of the original perfection. If the original perfection is both unified and diversified. And you see, the Bible describes an original perfection that is not a unity that diversifies. It's not originally one and then it diversifies. It's not three gods who form a committee and unify themselves. It is originally both. It's a 200% reality. It cannot be understood on a pie chart or a bar graph. It's not that kind of reality. It's a three-dimensional, maybe stochastic calculus models would come closer to it if you're into that kind of thing. where you have a three-dimensional with the beautiful colors and the computerized things. I think we come closer to God with that than we do with a pie chart and a bar graph. So unity and diversity. Then form and freedom. We all experience forms in reality, for instance, gravity, or electromagnetism, or thermodynamics. Those are all the basic structures of reality. And within those basic forms, we have freedom. For instance, the form of gravity makes me free to walk across the floor. If the form were not there, this motion would continue, and I would turn and spin and float, and very soon I would be dead. See, without the form, there is no freedom. I'll give you another equation. Total freedom equals, does anyone know what it equals? Total freedom equals death. Now that's politically incorrect, because in a postmodern world, freedom is the highest value. And the more you have, the freer you are, the better off you are. And what is the purpose of freedom? Fun, self-expression, fulfillment. Those are the purposes of freedom. Commitment, faithfulness, other-centeredness, service, way at the bottom of the list in a postmodern axiological hierarchy, in a values hierarchy. So I know that in a sophisticated place like the University of Zurich, I'm really singing out of tune when I say total freedom equals death. But it seems to me obviously true. If there were not the form of gravity that shaped and contained my freedom, I couldn't walk. I would be dead. It's obvious. Total freedom is death, and rapidly. We have to have forms, physically, socially. Try to drive in the streets of Zurich without the form of the red and green lights, and call that freedom. Okay? If that is freedom, then total freedom equals death. You see how that works? It's just on a practical level, that's how it works. But that it also works on a philosophical level and an ideological level. Total freedom equals death, the death of rationality, the death of communication, the death of language. And of course, it all started with the death of God and our friend Nietzsche. Good old Fred was a professor at the University of Basel. He was a bright lad, and he decided God was dead and that we were better off that way. Okay, so form and freedom. Then objectivity and subjectivity. First, I better talk about the revelation. What does the revelation tell us about the original perfection? It says that in the original perfection, there are three persons, and they are not identical with each other. They are quite different. Their forms are different, and in some cases, opposite. So it is the form of the Father to command and to send. It is the form of the Son to obey and to go. Opposite. But both functioning in the absolute perfection. Before there was space and time, before there was anything else, this was the complex reality that obtained in God, that there was form and freedom. And the Son is the God who obeys. See, and in our culture, in our alpha person, achiever society, we think, well, if he obeys, then he's an apprentice God waiting to get his license to practice divinity. And when he's really fully qualified, he won't obey anymore. He'll really be God. And he just commands. Well, see, this is our idea, but it is not the Bible's idea. This is the idea of our culture that has developed in a variety of ways, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The Bible has a very different idea that God obeys. Whoa. That says something about anthropology, doesn't it? And about sociology. That to be fully human, you must obey. That's a whole different idea than we usually have. So we have the form, and within the form we have the freedom. When the Son is faithful to his form, to keep his promises, to die on the cross, then he is free to be God and the Savior of the world. If he would be unfaithful to his form, the universe would disappear. So when God made people to live in form and freedom, he's not like an Olympic god, a Greek god up in Olympus saying, we live in clouds and eat ambrosia, and you, poor creatures, you have to muck around in the mud and the grit in form and freedom. But we live in a cosmic gas cloud of bliss. This isn't the idea here. God is saying, you creatures live in form and freedom because I live in form and freedom. He's not asking us to do something that he doesn't do. He's not asking us to make hard choices when he is free from making hard choices. He asks us to make hard choices because he makes hard choices that cost something. So there's a much closer relationship than possibly we imagine. Objectivity and subjectivity. This pulpit is objectively here. And we each see it from a subjective point of view. And you see the sign that is on that side of the pulpit, and I have no idea what it says or if it's even there, because we see less than there is. And that is subjectivity. But when I see the pulpit, I see the desk of my chemistry teacher in high school, and I see Mr. Corbett. And you do not. You cannot. But I really do. And that is part of the gestalt that we share here together. So we see more than there is. We see relationships, associations, memories, all kinds of things we see that are not the Ding an sich. That's not actually what is there, but it's true. It's real. It's not real in an objective sense. It's real in a subjective sense. And this is one of the things I really treasure about postmodernism. It has restored subjectivity to truth. And modernism had basically rejected it. I treasure that. I think it's a wonderful service to mankind that postmodernism has restored subjectivity to truth. I'm not so happy that it's kind of eliminating objectivity, but apparently you can't have everything in human philosophical history. But I think it's very healthy to have the restoration of subjectivity to truth. I am old enough that I grew up modern. Most of you are postmodern people from the cradle on. So in some ways we're living in different universes, the modern universe, the postmodern universe. So among God, in the original perfection, there is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Father does not change. He is always as he is. But the Son and the Holy Spirit see the Father from different points of view. And because they see from different points of view, what they see is different in some ways from what the other one sees. And because they both see perfectly, the differences in what they see are perfect. The differences are perfect. The persons of God are not clones of each other. They're truly different. And they each have a subjective point of view. And that's why 3 is the right number. 2 would only be binary. There would be no true subjectivity as we experience it. Then the creation would be more complex than the creator, which isn't going to work. But if there are 3 There is a true subjectivity, a true variety of point of view and experience. And for you, mathematicians and physicists and engineers, 4 is unnecessary because we find in reality an economy. And 4 is unnecessary and uneconomical, so 4 is not the number. The number is 3. Now, some of you thought it was 42, but it's really, it's really 3. Okay, that's the number that really works, 3. Okay. So, we find in our reality relationships, and we find that in the original perfection. We find in our reality personality. Now, most psychological models will describe personality as the description of the individual. And we've gotten used to that. Your personality is the description of yourself. But the Bible says no, that personality is beyond identity in relationship. That a description of yourself is without meaning, because meaning is relationships. So the personality of God is not one person. God is not a person. God is a personal God. And he is a personal God because there are 3 persons. And they have relationship and community among himself. God is singular and plural. Very interesting God. It's a very interesting and frankly satisfying starting point for the rest of reality. Particularly for the tremendous anomaly of the human being that doesn't fit the natural categories. The human being is not natural. The human being is supernatural. The human being shapes nature. Nature does not shape the human being. Take, for instance, wheat. Wheat naturally grows along the banks of streams, mixed with all other kinds of plants. Human beings come in and artistically, artis, the arm of the human, artistically say, wheat, you will grow in this field alone. Talk about manipulation. But you see, without that dominion, without that reshaping, without that increasing complexity of reality, human life could not happen. Human society, human culture, human civilization, science, all of the developments that we have could never happen naturally. Naturally, we, the naked ape, would live in the Ituri forest of the Republic of the Congo, eating bananas and sleeping in trees. Because nature is very unkind to the naked ape, and we would have a very narrow natural habitat. But we don't have a very narrow natural habitat. We don't even have a natural habitat. We can live on the moon. We can live under the ocean because we are not natural. We have dominion over the nature. We are categorically different from the other life forms. And the Bible gives in some detail the importance and the development of that and the meaning of that difference in human life. So personality is not the description of the individual. Personality is self-aware consciousnesses in relationship with other self-aware consciousnesses. And that begins with God. And then it continues with human beings. So in the Genesis account of the creation of Adam, Adam was aware of himself, he was aware of his environment, and he had an influence on his environment. He named the animals. And God said, it is not good. What? It is not good that the man should be alone. Why? I like to be alone. I used to be a monk. What's wrong with being alone? What was our proverb that I gave you? God alone is God and God is not alone. We see if that's true, then it's not good to be alone. Because if I'm alone, I don't have any meaning. I don't have any personality. I have to have the other in order to complete who I am. Because I am made in the image of a Trinitarian God, not a monistic origin. I am made in the image of a God who is three persons, so I, as a person alone, am not in the image of God. There has to be relationship. So Adam needed Eve. And in the right relationship of Adam and Eve, there is a third, there is a child. You may have noticed that that's how human beings happen. There's a mommy and a daddy and a baby. And if it doesn't happen like that, it doesn't happen. The human beings just aren't anymore. So God is three persons, and his image functions in sets of three. That's the basic necessity of human life. Three: mommy, daddy, baby. So the correspondence is not exact. You don't have mommy, daddy, baby. But you have a great similarity in that God is three persons with different forms and functions, and human beings are fundamentally three persons and more, of course, with different forms and functions. So the correspondence is very close, the image of God. But the image of God in the Genesis account is not him or her. The image of God is them. In the image of God made he them. That's a different psychological model, isn't it? It's a different anthropology. In the biblical anthropology, identity is beyond identity in relationship. Martin Buber would say the I-thou principle. Okay, so we also have dynamism. Everything is not the same. Things change. There's before, during, and after in our experience of reality. Among God, there is dynamism. There is no time, but there is dynamism. There's before, during, and after. The first letter of Peter tells us, before the world was made, before there was space and time, the Son was chosen and promised to enter into the world that had not been made yet and die to save it. So outside of space and time, there's before the choosing, and after the choosing. Before, during, and after, sequence, dynamism, but no time. There are two matrices of sequence in reality. You know, a matrix is like the movie. It's an atmosphere in which things happen. The matrix of T is water. T happens in water. The matrix of sound is air. Sound functions in air. The matrix of email is cyberspace. So there we're coming closer to the movie, aren't we? But all these matrices. So the matrix of sequence of before, during, and after in space is time. Things happen in time or they don't happen. The matrix of sequence outside of space is what? Eternity. Which means that eternity is not infinite time. It is a separate matrix. Which means that every point of time is present to every point of eternity. That's why prophecy is possible. Otherwise it wouldn't be. It wouldn't make any sense. See, every point of time is present to every point of eternity. And at the end of time, the two will conflate. And we will live with God and each other in eternity. And time will be no more, because it will conflate with eternity, and there will be only one matrix of sequence, whereas now there are two. I think you should always be working with a question. People ask me, what question are you working on? And I'm in the middle of working on the question, is eternity created? I know that time is created. I know that God lives in eternity. Is eternity created? I'm tending toward yes, but I'm not completely. So if any of you can help with that, I would be glad. Okay, so finally, we have needs. We need to be warm, to wear clothes, to eat, to breathe, to rest. We need these things. But more fundamentally, we need, for instance, to be seen. And we observe this in little children. Little children all day cry, "Daddy, look! Daddy, look!" And if there's a conflict between Daddy looking and eating lunch, Daddy always wins. Because it's a more basic need to be seen than to eat. It's fundamental to our being to be seen. And if Daddy doesn't look because he's always at work or divorced or in jail or dead or drunk or always on missionary outreach, pace, then the need is not met and the child is distorted and shriveled in his person. And that is the condition of all of us. Because our need, our legitimate need is not met in a broken world. So we need to be seen. We need also to be heard. If I speak, I need people to hear me. I don't even really need them to agree with me. I need them to hear me. I need to be heard. I need to be understood. And we see this with little children. Little children, before they speak German or French or whatever, they speak. And they are not understood. And they are enraged. They are in an agony of rage. And you see, I mean, they just explode because they are not heard. And they need to be heard because they are human. And we all need to be heard. And it doesn't happen all the time. And so we suffer because of that. And we need to make a difference. Where I have been and worked, it shouldn't be the same as if I never existed. I should make a mark. I should be significant, signo facto, to make a sign that can be read by others into the future. And we see this with children. They pile up the blocks, voila, difference. And they knock them down, voila, another difference. And sometimes the difference that they make is very inconvenient, but the way their creativity expresses itself, but it's essential for their being that they make a difference. We also need to be wanted. We need people to say, "Come, be with us, be with me, you are wanted." We need that. And you all know how horribly you suffer when that need is not met. That is probably the worst possible kind of pain, not to be wanted. It's much worse than a toothache, really. It's just horrible. Okay, where do those needs come from? Are they the result of sin? Do they come from the devil? Why do we have those needs? It seems to me that we have those needs because God has those needs. Maybe you never thought about God having needs before, but need is the basis of trust. And trust is part of love, and God is love. If I say to you, "I trust you totally, I trust you completely, I don't need you for anything, drop dead any minute," that doesn't work, you see. Trust, if I trust you, I have to trust you because I need you for something. So need is essential, and I would suggest that God has similar needs as his image has, and that's why we are in his image, because he has put in us the needs that he has. So he needs to be seen, to be heard, to make a difference, and to be wanted. And to God, having those needs is perfect joy, because they are a function of trust and love. And that's who he is. God is love. Here's my little picture of God. Each person of God empties himself to meet the needs of the other two. They die to self and live to others, which means that each person is emptied once and filled twice by the emptying of the others. So the filling increases exponentially until the energy is so great that God says, let there be light, and there's a universe. And the Bible calls this energy, this filling, love. Love is other-centeredness. Life is other-centeredness. God is other-centered among himself. Each person of God dies to self, sacrifices himself to meet the needs of the others, and because of that emptying, is capable of receiving a double filling, and is glorious beyond imagination, and joyful beyond imagination. This is God. And then God made people in his image to function in the same way. So the identity of Adam was not in Adam, it was in God and in Eve, and he was other-centered. And it was paradise. But then they became self-centered. The serpent came to Eve and he said, hey, Eve, how you doing? What about this tree over here? You see, this is the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And if you eat this fruit, you will know what is good and evil from your own self, from your own experience and your own idea, and you won't need to bother God to tell you what is good and evil. You won't need to trust God. And you certainly won't need to trust that lump of a husband who is sitting there not doing anything. So Eve saw, oh, you know, it's true. I could know for myself. I could be independent. I could be a liberated woman. And so she ate, and she died, because she became self-centered. I will know for myself. I won't need to trust. And when she eliminated trust from her life, she died. She became self-centered and implosive, like a black hole in space, that the force of the implosion is so great that the escape velocity is greater than the speed of light, and light cannot escape. It's a black hole. And that's what Eve became. She became a black hole, a self-imploding death. And then Adam ate, and he died. He became a self-imploding black hole. And then they knew something was wrong because they didn't trust each other anymore. They knew they were naked. They knew they were vulnerable. And they had never known that before. They were vulnerable in a sense, but that vulnerability didn't mean anything because it was perfect trust. It was perfect other-centered, but now it means something. So I sometimes think they could have held hands and gone to God and said, Father, we have a problem. Can you help us? But they didn't, because their implosion made them completely insane. So instead of going to the Creator, they reached into the creation and they found some fig leaves and they made aprons to conceal their sexuality, which seemed to be central to the problem. And maybe that helped, but it was like putting a Band-Aid on a cancer. It did not solve the problem. It did not solve their self-centered death. It just masked it. It concealed, it masked the symptom. But it didn't do anything about the disease or the cause of the disease. So in the third circle, the original perfection is other-centered. And we suffer because we have become self-centered. And then we suffer and we die. And we live in a situation of death, in a culture of death. We are dead in our sins, as the Bible says. Then what is the solution in the third circle? The solution is that the Creator himself will enter into the creation and become part of it. Merry Christmas. And then, being uncreated and created, transcendent and immanent, God and man, living in eternity, living in time, a unique situation. He did one thing. Typical God behavior. He emptied himself. Literally. drained of blood on the cross. He emptied himself, not for himself, but to meet the needs of the others. This is what God does. This is what God is. God is love. Love is other-centered. God on the cross was incarnational love. He emptied himself. That's what it means. That's what God does. He empties himself. And that produces life. So the death of Jesus was not the result of self-centeredness, but the result of perfect obedience and other-centeredness. And so that death swallowed all of death in victory, and death was killed on the cross. And the power of that emptying of the Creator into the creation made it possible for the whole cosmos to be recreated and restored, and for each human being who chooses to receive the power of that emptying, the power of that blood into their lives, to become remade, to be new creatures, to be born again. So we are dead because we are self-centered, imploding creatures. And in the salvation of the third circle, we become alive, other-centered creatures through the power of the emptying of the Creator into the creation. And then we begin to grow in other-centeredness and in Christ-likeness, as it would say in the New Testament. So there are my three circles. The first circle, the original perfection, is a perfect unity. We suffer because diversity, the illusion of diversity, has come into reality. Salvation is to wake up into the original perfection of unity. In the second circle, the original reality is the perfect balance and harmony of equal opposites. We suffer because disharmony and imbalance has come into reality. The salvation is restore the balance. In the third circle, the original perfection is other-centered, self-emptying, other-filling reality. We suffer because we have become self-centered. Salvation is to become other-centered again through the power of the emptying of the Creator into the creation.